Wrong cell, princess. Around here, every new girl gets taught a lesson before she earns her first meal.
Nay! I'm not here to fight anybody. Just let me get to my cell and stay out of your way.
Nobody asked what you wanted. We decide how your first day ends, not you. You don't have to do this. Walk away now, and nobody gets hurt.
The women behind the bars laughed and slammed their fists against the steel, shouting for the fight to start.
Listen to the new girl making threats. Go ahead, show us what you've got, or get on your knees and cry like every other rookie.
She never struggled. She only looked back at them. Those inmates had no idea they were trying to start a fight with a former undefeated world boxing champion who had spent her entire career waiting for the right moment to throw the first punch. The transport gate clanged open with a sound like thunder. Simone Avery stepped into North River Women's Correctional Facility wearing an orange jumpsuit that marked her as fresh meat. The fabric felt rough against her skin. Her wrists stayed locked in chains that bit into her bones. The cell block hallway stretched ahead like a tunnel. Gray concrete walls rose on both sides. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows that made everything look sick and pale. The air smelled of bleach mixed with sweat and fear. Prisoners in gray uniforms pressed against their cell bars. Their faces showed hungry excitement. Some shouted crude words. Others just stared with dead eyes that had seen too much. The noise echoed off the walls until it became one angry roar. "Fresh fish!" someone yelled from the back. "Look at this one thinking she's special." Simone kept walking. Her feet moved steady on the polished floor. She had learned long ago that showing fear only made predators circle closer. But she also knew how to watch. Her eyes swept the corridor, taking in details most people missed. Two white women blocked her path like a roadblock made of muscle and hate. The bigger one had shoulders wide as a truck bumper. Her brown hair hung in greasy strings around a face marked by old fights. This had to be Darla Kessler. Behind Simone, footsteps approached fast. The second woman moved like a snake getting ready to strike. "Well, well," Darla said. Her voice carried the kind of authority that came from breaking other people. "What do we have here?" Simone stopped walking. The chain around her waist rattled once, then went quiet. "Looks like someone thinks she's better than the rest of us," Marin Rusk said from behind. Her words dripped with poison. All calm and collected, like she's walking into some fancy hotel instead of prison. The guards stood along the walls like statues. Their hands rested on their belts. None of them moved to help. None of them spoke up to stop what was coming. Simone counted 5 officers total. All of them wore the same expression of bored interest, like they were watching a TV show they had seen before. Captain Lorna Vale leaned against the far wall. She held something in her hand, a stopwatch. Her thumb hovered over the button, and her eyes never left Simone's face. She was timing this, recording how long it took to break the new prisoner. The cameras mounted in the corners turned slowly. Red lights blinked like evil eyes. Everything was being recorded, but not to protect her, to use against her later. "You know what happens to stuck-up troublemakers in here?" Darla stepped closer. Her breath stank of coffee and cigarettes. "They learn real quick that their outside rules don't mean nothing." Before Simone could answer, Darla's thick fingers clamped over her mouth and cheek. The grip was iron-strong, forcing Simone's face up toward the ceiling. Pain shot through her jaw. The woman's palm tasted of salt and soap and something bitter. "Look at me when I'm talking to you." Darla squeezed harder. At the same moment, Marin's arms wrapped around Simone's waist from behind. The hold was tight and practiced. Together, the two women had Simone completely trapped. Or so they thought. The prisoners at the bars cheered louder. Some banged metal cups against the steel. The sound was like drums before a battle. Captain Vale clicked her stopwatch and smiled. Simone could have fought back immediately. Her body knew how to break free from holds like this. 15 years of professional boxing had taught her exactly where to strike and how hard to hit. But she forced herself to wait, to study, to learn what kind of place this really was. Darla drew back her free hand and slapped Simone across the face. The sound cracked through the hallway like a gunshot. Stars exploded behind Simone's eyes. Her cheek burned like fire. "That's for thinking you're special," Darla said. "Now get on your knees and apologize for bringing your attitude into our house." The prisoners roared their approval. Someone screamed, "Make her crawl!" Marin tried to force Simone down by pulling backward on her waist. That was her mistake. Simone shifted her weight forward just enough to trap Marin's right foot with her heel. Then she turned sharp and fast to the left. Physics did the rest. Marin's trapped foot couldn't follow the turn. Her balance broke like a snapped stick. She crashed onto the concrete floor with a grunt that knocked all the air from her lungs. Darla's eyes went wide with shock. She swung her fist in a wild haymaker that would have dropped most people. But Simone wasn't most people. She slipped to the outside of the punch, letting it whoosh past her ear. Before Darla could recover, Simone drove one compact shot under her ribs. Not hard enough to break bones, just hard enough to steal her breath and drop her to one knee. A third prisoner charged from the side, screaming like an animal. Simone pivoted, caught the woman's momentum, and redirected her straight into the cell bars with a crash that shook the metal. Then Simone stepped back immediately, hands at her sides. The whole fight had lasted maybe 10 seconds. The hallway went dead quiet except for the groaning of the 3 beaten women. Even the prisoners behind bars had stopped their noise. They stared at Simone like they were seeing a ghost. From the back of the corridor, an elderly black woman pressed her face against the bars. Her eyes were sharp and knowing. She had recognized something in Simone's footwork, the way she moved, the precision of her strikes. "That's Simone Avery," Odessa Lane whispered. Her voice carried clearly in the silence. "The undefeated world boxing champion." The whisper traveled from cell to cell like wildfire, spreading the impossible truth through the concrete and steel of North River Women's Correctional Facility. The alarm shrieked through North River like a wounded animal. Red lights flashed along the concrete walls as heavy boots thundered down the corridor. But the officers weren't rushing toward Darla, who had started the fight. They weren't helping Marin, who was still gasping on the floor. They were charging straight at Simone. "Face down, now!" Captain Vale screamed, her baton already in her hand. Simone raised her palms and started to kneel slowly. Before she could fully lower herself, 2 guards slammed her onto the cold concrete. Her cheek scraped against the rough floor. Vale pressed her knee hard between Simone's shoulder blades, grinding down with all her weight. "Assault on multiple inmates," Vale announced loudly, making sure everyone could hear. "Unprovoked violence during intake procedures." Simone turned her head slightly, ignoring the pain in her ribs. Her voice stayed calm and clear. "The cameras recorded everything. 3 women attacked me first." Vale laughed like she had just heard the funniest joke in the world. "Cameras only show what officers allow them to show, convict. And what I saw was you starting a fight before you'd been here 10 minutes. Around them, the other guards helped Darla and Marin to their feet. They brushed dirt off their gray uniforms and checked them for injuries with gentle hands. "Just a warning this time, ladies," one officer said kindly, "but try to stay away from troublemakers." Darla nodded gratefully, but her eyes stayed locked on Simone with pure hatred. The message was crystal clear. Some prisoners got protection, others got punishment. They dragged Simone to the intake processing room and forced her to strip again. The first search had been routine. This one was designed to humiliate. Guards tore through her few belongings like they were hunting for weapons. They ripped pages from her legal documents and scattered them across the floor. "Look at this," one guard said, holding up a newspaper clipping about Simone's last championship fight. The photo showed her raising both gloved hands in victory, sweat gleaming under the arena lights. Little Miss Boxing Champion thinks she's still special. He crumpled the picture into a ball and tossed it into the trash. The other guards laughed. 15 years ago, maybe, another officer said. Now she's just another convict who can't follow simple rules. They gave her a torn orange jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too small and shoes with holes in the soles. Then they marched her through a maze of corridors to the isolation wing. The cell was barely larger than a bathroom. Water covered the concrete floor, ice cold and ankle deep. The metal bench was rusted and sharp-edged. No blanket, no pillow, just 4 concrete walls and the sound of dripping water. 24 hours to think about your behavior, Vale said through the slot in the door. Maybe next time you'll remember that new fish don't make the rules around here. The lights went out. Simone sat on the narrow bench, her feet in the freezing water, and waited. She had learned patience during her boxing career. Champions knew how to endure. Shortly after midnight, footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Slow and deliberate, expensive heels clicking against concrete. The sound stopped right outside Simone's cell. A woman's voice spoke through the darkness. Educated, controlled, dangerous. "Ms. Avery, I'm Warden Celeste Harrow. We need to talk." The door slot opened. Light spilled into the cell, and Harrow's face appeared in the opening. She looked exactly like what she was, a professional administrator who had learned to disguise cruelty as efficiency. Her gray hair was pulled back in a perfect bun. Her suit was pressed and spotless, even at this hour. Harrow slid something through the slot. It landed on the wet floor with a splash. Simone picked it up carefully. It was an old photograph, protected by plastic. The image showed her 15 years younger, holding the World Welterweight Championship belt above her head, while thousands of fans cheered from the darkness beyond the ring lights. "The hallway incident wasn't random, Ms. Avery," Harrow said quietly. "It was an audition. We needed to confirm that imprisonment hadn't dulled your championship instincts." Simone stared at the photograph. Her younger self looked so confident, so sure that the world made sense, and that hard work was always rewarded. "North River has a special facility beneath our laundry building," Harrow continued. "We host private exhibitions for a very select clientele, wealthy individuals who appreciate the raw authenticity of unregulated competition." The pieces began clicking together in Simone's mind. The guards who had watched instead of intervening, Vale timing the fight with her stopwatch, the way Darla had moved like she was following a script. "For months, our viewers have been requesting one specific participant," Harrow said. "The undefeated champion who disappeared from professional boxing 15 years ago. The woman who refused to throw a fight for Graham Voss and vanished rather than compromise her principles." Another photograph slid through the slot. This one showed the prison's laundry facility from above, but certain areas had been marked with red ink. Underground chambers, hidden corridors, fighting rings built beneath the legitimate prison infrastructure. "You were never brought to North River merely to serve your sentence, Ms. Avery." Harrow slid a folded contract through the opening. The paper was thick and expensive, like something signed in corporate boardrooms rather than prison cells. "You were brought here to fight." The next morning, guards yanked Simone from the flooded isolation cell without explanation. Her jumpsuit was still damp from the night in ankle-deep water. Her feet squelched in wet shoes as they marched her through corridors she had never seen before. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Shut up," Vale snapped. "Walk." They descended a narrow staircase behind the laundry facility. The air grew warmer and thick with steam from industrial pipes. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows against concrete walls. This wasn't part of the regular prison. This was something hidden underneath. The service tunnel stretched longer than Simone expected. Boiler rooms branched off to either side, filled with massive heating units and water tanks. The guards' footsteps echoed in the confined space. Finally, They stopped at a heavy steel door marked Authorized Personnel Only. Vale punched numbers into an electronic lock. The door swung open with a mechanical hiss. Beyond was an arena. Simone stepped inside and felt her stomach drop. The room was larger than she had imagined possible beneath a prison. Professional lighting hung from the ceiling, casting bright white illumination over a regulation-sized boxing ring in the center. The canvas was stained dark brown in several places, old blood that had never been properly cleaned. Betting screens lined one wall, displaying odds and payout calculations. Medical tables sat in the corners, equipped with IV bags and trauma supplies. Security cameras pointed at the ring from multiple angles. Everything was professional-grade equipment, expensive and carefully maintained. This wasn't some amateur fight club. This was a business. Impressive, isn't it? Warden Harrow emerged from behind the medical station. She wore a different suit today, navy blue and perfectly pressed. We've invested considerable resources in creating an authentic viewing experience. One of the large screens flickered to life. A man's face appeared, transmitted through an encrypted video connection. Simone recognized him immediately, even though 15 years had passed. Graham Voss looked older, his hair completely gray now, but his eyes held the same cold calculation she remembered from their final meeting. "Hello, Simone," Voss said through the speakers. His voice carried that familiar tone of false warmth wrapped around pure hatred. "You look exactly like I expected. Prison suits you." Simone's hands clenched into fists. "I wondered when you'd show your face, you piece of garbage." Voss laughed. "Still the same defiant attitude. That's what made you so valuable in the ring, and so dangerous outside it." Harrow gestured toward the screen. "Mr. Voss owns the private company that manages North River's operations. He purchased it through several shell corporations over the past 3 years. I've been very patient," Voss continued. 15 years of waiting for the right opportunity. Do you remember our last conversation, Simone? You told me that real champions don't throw fights. You said I could never buy your integrity. I meant it. I know you did. That's why I had to destroy you properly." The screen split, showing security footage from a traffic intersection. Simone watched herself driving through a green light on the night Martin Keene died. The timestamp showed 11:47 p.m. Then the image changed to different footage of the same intersection, same angle, but now showing a different vehicle running the red light and striking Keene's car. The timestamp on this version read 11:47 p.m. as well. "Impressive what digital editing can accomplish these days," Voss said. "The original footage showing your innocence still exists, of course, locked away in my personal files." Harrow stepped closer to the ring. "Here's our offer, Ms. Avery. Win 6 fights in this arena. The matches will be broadcast to Mr. Voss's private clients. Your final opponent will be selected for maximum entertainment value. Complete this tournament successfully, and the original traffic footage will be anonymously delivered to federal investigators. And if I refuse, then younger inmates will take your place," Voss replied. "We have several girls under 25 who could provide adequate entertainment. They might not survive as long as a trained champion, but our viewers appreciate variety." Simone stared at the blood-stained canvas. She could see exactly what they wanted. They needed her to become their weapon, their prize fighter, their proof that even champions could be broken and controlled. "Go to hell," she said. Voss smiled. "I expected that response. Let me show you something." The screen changed again. This time it displayed a photograph of a young woman lying in a hospital bed, connected to life support machines. Simone's breath caught in her throat. The face was older, but she recognized it immediately. "Maria Santos," Voss said quietly. "Your former training partner. She was imprisoned here 18 months ago on drug charges. She tried to organize resistance among the inmates, refused to participate in our exhibitions. Tragically, she suffered a fatal overdose in her cell. The photograph disappeared, replaced by Voss's satisfied expression. Maria was asking about you right before she died, Simone. She kept saying you would come back someday to help them. She believed in you until the very end. Simone's vision blurred with rage. Maria had been like a younger sister to her, tough and loyal and never afraid to stand up for what was right. The idea that she had died alone in this place, waiting for help that never came, made Simone's chest feel like it was being crushed. Think carefully about your next words, Voss warned, because they'll determine how many other people suffer for your pride. The guards grabbed Simone's arms and dragged her toward the exit before she could respond. As they hauled her back through the service tunnel, one terrible truth crystallized in her mind. Her conviction wasn't random. Her imprisonment wasn't an accident. Even the hallway assault with Darla had been planned from the beginning. Everything that had happened to her was part of one calculated plan to break her down and force her into this underground ring. They returned her to cell block C just before lunch, where the other inmates watched her with curious eyes. Simone sat on her bunk and stared at the concrete wall, processing the magnitude of what she now understood. Voss had orchestrated every detail of her destruction, and somehow she was going to make him pay for it. After lunch, Captain Vale led Simone to a lower bunk in cell block C. The mattress looked thin and stained. Beside it sat an elderly black woman with silver hair braided close to her scalp. "Odessa Lane," the woman said quietly. "Been here 8 years. Simone Avery." Vale slammed her baton against the metal bed frame. "No talking during assignment." The captain immediately began searching Simone's mattress, tearing off the sheets and flipping it over. She ran her hands along every seam, checking for contraband that obviously wasn't there. Meanwhile, 3 white inmates lounged on their bunks nearby, watching the show. Vale ignored them completely. "Where are your legal papers, Avery?" Simone pointed to a manila folder on her pillow. Vale grabbed it and dumped the entire contents into the nearest toilet. Court documents, appeal forms, and witness statements scattered into the dirty water. "Oops," Vale said with a cold smile. "Better fish those out before they dissolve." The other inmates snickered. Odessa kept her face carefully blank. "Now get a mop and bucket," Vale continued. "This corridor needs scrubbing." Simone glanced around the cell block. The floors looked recently cleaned, but she retrieved the supplies without argument and began mopping the already spotless tiles. Behind her, the white inmates settled in front of a small television to watch their afternoon programs. These were the same women who had disciplinary reports, thick as phone books. Yet they got entertainment time while Simone scrubbed floors on her knees. Darla emerged from her cell and strutted over to where Simone worked. Her broad shoulders blocked the overhead light. "You embarrassed me yesterday," Darla said loudly. "Made me look weak in front of everyone." Simone continued mopping without looking up. "I'm talking to you," Darla shouted. "Get on your knees and apologize, right now." The entire cell block fell silent. Even the television volume seemed to drop. Simone slowly stood and faced Darla directly. "No," she said calmly. Darla's face flushed red. "You think you're better than me? I think you started a fight and lost it." Vale stepped forward with her baton raised. "Avery, you will show proper respect to senior inmates." "Or what?" The captain's answer came fast and brutal. She swung the baton behind Simone's knees, striking the pressure points that control balance. Simone's legs buckled, and she dropped to the concrete. But her eyes never left Darla's face. Even kneeling on the hard floor with Vale's weapon pressed against her neck, Simone's gaze remained steady and defiant. She wasn't apologizing. She wasn't begging. She was making it clear that only the baton forced her down, not fear of Darla. "Say you're sorry," Darla demanded. Simone said nothing. Vale pressed the baton harder. "I said apologize." The silence stretched, until other inmates began shifting uncomfortably. Finally, Vale pulled back her weapon and walked away, frustrated that her humiliation hadn't worked completely. That evening, Odessa explained how North River operated. Every time they beat someone, they write it up as inmate misconduct, she whispered during evening count. Victim becomes the aggressor in their reports. Then they transfer witnesses before appeals reach court. Been happening for years. Simone watched frightened prisoners throughout the cell block. Whenever Darla's crew walked past, women would lose their balance, drop their belongings, or stumble into walls. They were scared and showing it. Watch their wrists, Simone told Odessa quietly. Keep your hands up when they approach. Never let someone trap you against the wall. Always keep moving toward cameras, not away from them. Odessa nodded, memorizing every instruction. Before lights out, the older woman leaned close to Simone's bunk. Those women, they say, got transferred. Odessa's voice was barely audible. Maria Santos, Jennifer Walsh, Keiko Tanaka? They didn't leave North River alive. They died after fights in the basement beneath the laundry facility. The metal door clanged open at dawn. Captain Vale stood in the entrance, her uniform crisp despite the early hour. "Shower time, ladies," she announced. "Move it." Simone and Odessa joined the line of prisoners shuffling toward the communal facilities. The shower corridor stretched ahead like a concrete tunnel, lined with rusted pipes and cracked tiles that had seen decades of neglect. Vale positioned herself at the entrance, clipboard in hand. 15 minutes, she barked. Anyone takes longer gets written up for wasting water. The other inmates filed past, heads down, moving quickly. Simone noticed how they avoided eye contact with Vale and stayed close to the walls. Fear radiated from every step they took. When Simone and Odessa reached the doorway, Vale stepped aside with deliberate casualness. She turned her back to the corridor and began studying her paperwork with exaggerated interest. "Captain," one of the guards called from down the hall, "you got a phone call in the office." "Take a message," Vale replied without looking up. "I'm supervising shower detail." But her eyes stayed fixed on the clipboard. Her radio remained silent. The surveillance camera above the entrance had been turned to face the opposite wall. Simone felt the trap closing around her. Footsteps echoed from behind, heavy boots on wet concrete. Darla's voice carried through the steam. "Well, well, look what we found." Simone turned slowly. Darla entered the corridor with Marin and 3 other women. Each carried something metallic that glinted under the fluorescent lights. Sharpened toothbrushes, a padlock stuffed inside a sock. "Thought you were smart yesterday?" Darla continued. "Making me look stupid in front of everyone?" The 5 women spread across the narrow passage, blocking both exits. Steam from the running showers created a thick fog that would hide whatever happened next. Simone stepped backward into the corridor's narrowest section. The walls pressed close on both sides. Only one attacker could reach her at a time here. "You gonna kneel now?" Marin sneered, raising her sharpened weapon. "No," Simone said quietly. Marin lunged first. The makeshift blade sliced across Simone's shoulder, drawing blood that mixed with the shower spray. Pain flared down her arm, but Simone had felt worse in championship rounds. Darla swung the weighted sock like a club. The padlock smashed into Simone's ribs with brutal force, sending her stumbling against the slick tiles. Her breath left her lungs in a sharp gasp. "Not so tough now!" Darla shouted, raising the weapon again. But Simone controlled her breathing, drew air deep into her chest, focused through the pain like she'd done thousands of times in training. When Darla swung again, Simone moved. She trapped the striking arm at the wrist and elbow, stepped inside Darla's reach, landed 2 precise punches to the body that stole all the air from her attacker's lungs. Darla doubled over, gasping. Simone positioned her between herself and the other women, using her as a barrier while she caught her breath. "Get her!" Marin screamed. The 3rd attacker rushed forward, but the narrow corridor worked against them now. She had to climb over Darla's crumpled form. Simone slipped to the side and delivered a short uppercut that dropped the woman instantly. Maren came next, wild with rage. Her sharpened toothbrush caught Simone across the jaw, splitting skin. Blood filled her mouth, but she stayed balanced on the wet floor. Simone ducked under Maren's follow-up swing and swept her legs. Maren hit the tiles hard and didn't get up. The fourth woman hesitated, seeing her allies scattered across the shower floor. Simone stepped toward her with controlled movements. No wasted energy, no unnecessary violence. The woman dropped her weapon and backed away. "Stay down," Simone told the injured attackers. She meant it. Anyone who remained on the ground wouldn't be hurt further. Prisoners crowded the doorway, watching through the steam. Their faces showed recognition now, understanding. The rumors were true. The quiet woman in the orange jumpsuit really was Simone Avery, former world champion, the fighter who had disappeared from the boxing world 15 years ago. Captain Vale's boots splashed through the puddles as she entered the corridor. She surveyed the scene with satisfaction rather than surprise. "Cuff her," Vale ordered 2 guards who appeared behind her. 5 assaults, unprovoked violence against fellow inmates. The shackles closed around Simone's wrists with metallic clicks. "Warden Harrow wants to see you tonight," Vale said with a cold smile. "She has a proposition about your future here at North River." The captain leaned close enough that only Simone could hear her next words. "You can enter our tournament willingly, or we'll keep arranging these accidents until you have no choice." The infirmary smelled like disinfectant and stale air. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the medical cots where injured inmates waited for treatment. Simone sat still while Nurse Elena Morales cleaned the deep cut across her shoulder. The woman worked with gentle hands, her dark eyes focused on the wound. "This needs 8 stitches," Morales said quietly. She glanced toward the door, then back at Simone. "The medical report will say you fell in the shower, slipped on wet tiles. That's not what happened." "I know." Morales threaded the needle with steady fingers. "But that's what Captain Vale wants written down. She told me to document it as an accident." The needle pierced skin. Simone didn't flinch. She'd felt worse pain in championship fights. "How many accidents get reported here?" Simone asked. Morales paused. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Too many. Broken ribs from falling downstairs, concussions from walking into doors, black eyes from tripping over nothing." She pulled the thread tight, creating the first stitch. "The women who fight in the basement, their injuries never match the reports. A fighter comes back with a shattered jaw, but the paperwork says she had dental problems. Someone returns with 3 broken fingers, but I'm supposed to write that she caught them in a door. You've been covering this up for years." "I've been surviving." Morales tied off another stitch. "If I refuse to sign the false reports, they'll fire me. Replace me with someone who asks fewer questions. At least this way, I can still help the women who need real medical care." Simone understood. The nurse was trapped just like everyone else. "But you keep the real records somewhere," Simone said. It wasn't a question. Morales nodded slowly. "Hidden copies. Digital files they don't know exist. Every true injury. Every suspicious death. Every time the official story doesn't match the evidence." The final stitch pulled tight. Morales bandaged the wound with careful precision. "Why are you telling me this?" Simone asked. "Because you're different." Morales cleaned her hands with antiseptic. "Most fighters who come through here, they want to win. They want to hurt people. You protected yourself in that shower without trying to destroy anyone." The infirmary door opened. Captain Vale stepped inside, her uniform crisp despite the humid air. "Time to go, Avery." Vale's voice carried authority and menace in equal measure. "Warden Harrow is waiting." Simone stood slowly, testing her injured shoulder. The stitches held firm. "Where are we going?" "Down to the laundry facility. You have work to do." Vale led her through corridors that grew darker and more isolated with each turn. They passed through 3 locked security doors, each requiring Vale's key card. The air grew warmer. The sound of industrial machinery echoed from somewhere ahead. They stopped at a maintenance door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." Vale unlocked it, revealing a narrow tunnel that sloped downward into artificial light. "After you," Vale said with a cold smile. The tunnel walls were concrete, lined with pipes and electrical cables. Water dripped from somewhere overhead, creating puddles on the floor. The air smelled like laundry detergent and something else, something metallic. They emerged into a vast underground space beneath the prison laundry. Industrial washers and dryers lined one wall, but the center of the room had been converted into something else entirely. A fighting ring. Temporary bleachers surrounded a regulation boxing ring with proper ropes and canvas. Bright lights hung from the ceiling, creating a professional arena hidden beneath North River's legitimate operations. Cameras mounted on metal stands pointed toward the ring from multiple angles. Warden Harrow stood beside the ring, wearing an expensive gray suit that looked out of place in the underground facility. She held a tablet computer in one hand, checking something on the screen. "Welcome to your new workplace, Miss Avery," Harrow said without looking up. "Our investors have been very eager to see you perform." Scattered throughout the bleachers sat about 30 inmates, all wearing the gray uniforms of long-term residents. They watched Simone with mixtures of fear and curiosity. Guards stood at every exit, ensuring no one could leave without permission. "Tonight, you'll face Celia Boone," Harrow continued. "She's 22 years old, served 8 months for check fraud. No fighting experience whatsoever." A guard pushed a young woman toward the ring. Celia Boone was small and thin, with short brown hair and frightened eyes. She wore boxing gloves that looked too big for her hands. "I don't want to fight," Celia whispered, loud enough for Simone to hear. "You don't have a choice," Harrow replied. "Miss Boone has been spending too much time in the library, reading legal books, asking questions about appeal processes. She needs to learn that some activities aren't appropriate for inmates." The threat was clear: fight or face isolation until her spirit broke completely. Simone stepped closer to Celia. The young woman trembled like a cornered animal. "Listen to me," Simone said quietly. "I'm not going to hurt you. When that bell rings, throw a few punches. Make it look real. But I promise, you'll walk out of here safe." Celia's eyes filled with tears. "They said if I lose badly, I'll spend 6 months in solitary confinement. You won't lose badly. Trust me." A guard handed Simone a pair of worn boxing gloves. The leather was stained with old sweat and blood from previous fights. She pulled them on with practiced efficiency. The bell rang. Celia came forward with desperate, wild swings. Her technique was terrible, but her fear gave her dangerous unpredictability. Simone moved backward, staying just out of range, letting Celia tire herself with wasted motion. The young woman threw a desperate right hand. Simone caught it on her gloves, absorbing the impact without countering. She could have ended the fight immediately, but that wasn't the point. "Keep moving," Simone said softly. "Don't stop throwing punches." Celia swung again. Simone slipped to the side, making it look like a close miss. The watching inmates leaned forward, believing they were seeing a competitive fight. For 90 seconds, Simone controlled the distance while Celia burned through her nervous energy. When the young woman began breathing hard, Simone knew it was time to end things safely. She stepped forward, caught Celia's next punch, and delivered a precise shot to the liver. The blow landed perfectly between the ribs, affecting the nerve cluster without causing permanent damage. Celia dropped to one knee, gasping for breath but uninjured. The referee began counting. Celia couldn't stand before 10, but she was already breathing normally. "Continue the beating," Harrow commanded from ringside. "She's still conscious." Simone looked down at Celia, who knelt on the canvas with her hands pressed against her stomach. The young woman was finished, but not broken. "No," Simone said clearly. "The fight is over. I'm ordering you to continue. I don't hit people who can't defend themselves." Harrow's face darkened with anger. She spoke into her tablet, apparently communicating with someone watching remotely. After a moment, she looked up with a thin smile. "Mr. Voss says your discipline makes you more valuable than ordinary brutality. He's very pleased with your performance." The guards helped Celia to her feet. She walked unsteadily but under her own power. No permanent damage, no humiliation beyond what was necessary. Back in cell block C an hour later, Simone sat on her narrow bunk, while other inmates watched her with new understanding. She wasn't just a famous fighter. She was someone who used her strength to protect others. Odessa Lane approached slowly, her elderly frame moving with careful dignity. The 68-year-old woman had silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "That was well done tonight," Odessa said, settling onto the edge of Simone's bunk. "Celia will recover completely. You could have hurt her much worse." "That wasn't the point." "No, it wasn't." Odessa glanced around the cell block, ensuring no guards were close enough to overhear. "I've been watching this place for 6 years, memorizing things they think nobody notices." She tapped her temple with one weathered finger. Names of women who disappeared after underground fights. Dates when the official records were changed. Guard schedules during illegal tournaments. Payment amounts that show up in commissary accounts after certain inmates cooperate. Odessa's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Betty Vance died 3 months ago. Official cause was drug overdose, but I saw her injuries before they cleaned up the body. Fractured skull. Internal bleeding. She'd been beaten to death in that ring downstairs. You remember all of this? Every detail, every name, every suspicious death and altered report from the past 6 years." Odessa's eyes hardened with determination. "They can destroy paperwork, but they can't erase what's locked inside my head." The morning alarm pierced through cell block C at 5:30, dragging Simone from restless sleep. Her ribs throbbed where Celia had landed one desperate punch during the underground fight. Every breath sent sharp reminders through her chest. Odessa was already sitting upright on her bunk, eyes closed in concentration. "Harrow's betting records from March," the elderly woman recited in a whisper. "Fight 1, Valdez versus Martinez. Total wagers, 47,000. Guard payouts, 8,000 distributed to Vale, Morrison, and Jackson. Medical falsification fee, 1,200 to cover Valdez's internal bleeding." Simone rolled carefully onto her side, watching Odessa's face remain perfectly still while her memory worked. "Fight 2, Kim versus Rodriguez. Total wagers, 62,000. Kim suffered fractured vertebrae, but records show minor bruising. Transfer approved 3 days later. Kim never left North River alive." "How do you remember exact numbers?" "Same way I remembered every municipal budget when I worked for the city," Odessa replied, opening her eyes. "Numbers don't lie. People do." Breakfast brought the usual chaos of metal trays, watery eggs, and stale bread. Simone kept her movements careful, protecting her injured ribs while navigating the crowded dining hall. Marin Rusk blocked her path to an empty table. "Look who's walking slow today," Marin sneered, her voice carrying across nearby tables. "Yesterday's champion looks like yesterday's garbage." Simone glanced toward the guard station. Captain Vale stood watching with obvious anticipation, her hand resting on her radio. 3 more guards had positioned themselves at strategic exits. They wanted this confrontation. "Excuse me," Simone said calmly, attempting to step around Marin. "I'm not done talking to you." Marin shoved Simone's shoulder, trying to make her drop the breakfast tray. "You think beating up Celia makes you tough? That girl couldn't fight her way out of a paper bag." Celia sat at a corner table, her face flushed with shame. Other inmates watched nervously, sensing the tension building. Simone noticed Vale's grip tighten on her radio. The captain was ready to call for backup the moment Simone retaliated. Instead, Simone turned to Celia. "Come sit with us," she called across the dining hall. "Odessa saved you a spot." Celia looked up uncertainly, then gathered her tray and walked toward Odessa's table. Other inmates shifted to make room. Marin's face twisted with frustration. "You can't ignore me forever." "I'm not ignoring you," Simone replied, moving toward the table where Celia and Odessa waited. "I just don't have time for playground games." The comment drew quiet laughter from several prisoners. Marin's cheeks burned red, but without physical contact, she had no excuse to escalate. Vale's disappointed expression confirmed that Simone had avoided their trap. At the table, Odessa smiled approvingly, while Celia picked at her breakfast. "Thank you," Celia whispered. "I hate when they use my name like that." "They're trying to divide us," Simone explained. "Make us ashamed of each other instead of angry at them." After breakfast, the work assignments sent most inmates to various prison jobs. Simone drew laundry duty in the basement facility, where the underground fights occurred. The industrial washing machines filled the space with humid heat and constant noise. Odessa, Celia, and 3 other older prisoners worked the same shift. Within the first hour, Simone began teaching them basic defensive movements while they folded prison uniforms. "If someone grabs your wrist," she demonstrated quietly, "don't pull against their strength. Twist toward their thumb. It's the weakest part of any grip." She showed Celia how to break free from a wrist hold using rotation instead of force. "Always move toward light and cameras," she continued, indicating the surveillance equipment mounted throughout the laundry. "Dark corners are where bad things happen without witnesses." An older woman named Patricia practiced the balance techniques Simone demonstrated. "Keep your feet wider than your shoulders," Simone instructed. "Harder to knock down someone with a solid base." The lessons continued throughout the morning shift. Simple movements, basic awareness. Nothing flashy or obvious, just practical survival skills disguised as casual conversation. By lunch break, the temperature in the laundry had climbed beyond tolerable levels. "Ventilation's been shut off," Odessa observed, wiping sweat from her forehead. "This isn't normal heat." Simone checked the air circulation vents, all sealed. When they returned from lunch, their workload had doubled. Massive piles of prison uniforms, towels, and bedding covered every available surface. "Move faster," barked Guard Morrison. "Everything gets processed today, or nobody goes back upstairs." The combination of sealed ventilation and increased work quickly overwhelmed the older prisoners. Patricia stumbled while carrying a heavy basket of wet uniforms. Another woman sat down heavily, breathing in short gasps. Then Celia collapsed. She dropped to her knees beside a washing machine, her face pale and damp with sweat. Her breathing came in rapid, shallow pants. Simone immediately shut down the nearest machines and knelt beside her. "She needs medical attention," Simone called to Morrison. "She needs to finish her work. She's having heat exhaustion. Then she should work faster and get out of here sooner." Simone stood up slowly, her voice carrying through the suddenly quiet laundry facility. "Turn the ventilation back on. Reduce the workload to normal levels. Get Nurse Morales down here now." "You don't give orders in my prison," Morrison snarled. "Then you give them," Simone replied. "Because nobody's moving until Celia gets help." Odessa stepped up beside Simone, then Patricia, then the other older prisoners. The entire work line stood motionless, arms crossed, faces defiant. Morrison reached for his radio, but Captain Vale's voice crackled through before he could speak. "Problem in the laundry? Inmates are refusing to work. Handle it." Vale arrived within minutes, her baton already in her hand. She surveyed the line of motionless prisoners, then focused on Simone. "Get back to work. Now. After Celia receives medical attention." Vale's baton whistled through the air, striking Simone across the back with vicious force. Pain exploded between her shoulder blades, but she remained standing. I said now. The other prisoners didn't move. Their unity held firm despite Vale's violence. "We're not machines," Odessa said quietly. "We're human beings." Vale raised her baton again, but footsteps echoed from the stairwell. Nurse Elena Morales descended into the laundry, her medical kit in hand. "I received a medical emergency call," Morales announced. "False alarm?" Vale snapped. "I'll determine that after examining the patient." Morales knelt beside Celia, checking her pulse and temperature. After several minutes, she helped the young woman to her feet. "Heat exhaustion," she confirmed. "She needs rest and fluids immediately." Vale's face darkened, but she couldn't contradict a medical professional in front of surveillance cameras. "Turn the ventilation back on," Morales added. "This temperature violates occupational safety standards." Within minutes, cool air flowed through the vents again. The impossible workload was quietly reduced. Celia was escorted to the infirmary. Their first united stand had worked. That evening, Morales approached Simone during medication distribution in cell block C. Under the pretense of checking her blood pressure, the nurse slipped folded papers into Simone's hand. "Copied medical reports," Morales whispered. 12 women officially transferred to other facilities. All died from injuries sustained in underground fights. Their families never learned the truth. Later, during the final count before lights out, Darla moved close to Simone's cell. "I know where Harrow keeps the original betting ledger," she whispered urgently. "Meet me in the shower corridor at midnight. There's something you need to see." The maintenance passage smelled like rust and old water. Simone followed Odessa's whispered directions through the narrow tunnel, her bare feet silent against the metal flooring. The elderly woman had mapped every hidden route during her years at North River, knowledge passed down like precious secrets. Darla waited beside the locked laundry supply room, her massive frame hunched in the shadows. Her usual aggressive posture was gone. Instead, she looked broken. "You came," Darla whispered. "Talk fast." Darla's hand shook as she pulled a key from her pocket. "Harrow owns me, completely. My daughter Emma has a heart condition. Needs surgery every few years to stay alive. Harrow controls the medical authorization for dependents of long-term inmates." The supply room door creaked open. Inside, hidden behind industrial cleaning supplies, sat a metal cabinet. "Emma's next surgery is scheduled for December. Harrow told me she'd cancel the approval if I didn't follow orders. Break Simone Avery. Make her desperate. Drive her into the fights." Simone's fists clenched. "Keep talking." "There's more." Darla's voice cracked. 5 years ago, a man contacted me through my towing company, Graham Voss. Paid me $10,000 cash to abandon a damaged sedan near your address. Told me it was insurance fraud. Nothing violent. I needed the money for Emma's treatment. The words hit Simone like physical blows. "You planted the card that convicted me." "I didn't know. He said nobody would get hurt. Just some rich guy scamming his insurance company." Tears streamed down Darla's cheeks. "When I saw your name on the news, connected to a hit-and-run murder, I realized what I'd done." Simone stepped closer, her hands rising instinctively. Every muscle in her body screamed for violence. This woman had destroyed her life, stolen her freedom, condemned her to rot in prison for a crime that never happened. But striking Darla wouldn't bring back the lost years. It would only eliminate their only lead to Voss. Simone lowered her hands. "Show me what's in the cabinet." Darla opened the metal doors with trembling fingers. Inside were betting sheets, photographs of underground fights, and a tablet computer. She activated the device, revealing a live video feed. The screen showed a well-appointed office with multiple monitors displaying financial data. At the center sat a thin man with graying hair, typing numbers into a computer. Martin Keene. The man Simone was convicted of killing sat alive and healthy, managing betting accounts from what appeared to be Voss's headquarters. He looked older, thinner, but undeniably breathing. The coroner was paid, Darla explained. They found some homeless guy who overdosed, burned his face with chemicals, then claimed it was Keen's body. The real Keen disappeared under Voss's protection. You went to prison for murdering a living man. Simone stared at the screen, watching her supposed victim count money and update wagering spreadsheets. The full scope of the conspiracy crashed over her like a wave. Heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. "Hide," Darla hissed, shoving the tablet back into the cabinet and slamming it shut. They dove behind stacked cleaning supplies just as Captain Vale entered the supply room, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. "Where's my access key, you thieving cow?" Vale's flashlight beams swept across the supply room, lingering on the cleaning supplies where Simone and Darla crouched in silence. The captain's heavy boots clomped between the shelves, her breathing sharp with irritation. "I know someone's been down here," Vale muttered, rattling keys against her belt. "When I find out which rat has been stealing from me." The beam moved past their hiding spot. Vale kicked a mop bucket, sending it clattering across the floor, then stomped back toward the corridor. Her footsteps faded into the distance. Darla waited 30 seconds before standing. "She'll come back. We need to move." They returned to cell block C separately. Darla first, then Simone 5 minutes later. The 2 o'clock security count passed without incident. Guards moved through the cells, checking bodies, marking their clipboards. Nobody noticed the slight tremor in Darla's hands or the calculating look in Simone's eyes. At breakfast the next morning, they sat at opposite tables like sworn enemies. Darla glared across the cafeteria while chewing her rubbery eggs. Simone kept her expression blank, spooning oatmeal without tasting it. But when Odessa shuffled past Simone's table, the old woman whispered, "Medical supply closet. 10 minutes." Simone finished her meal slowly, then asked permission to use the restroom. She slipped into the supply closet where Odessa, Darla, and Morales waited in the cramped space between IV stands and boxes of gauze. "We saw the footage," Morales said quietly. "Martin Keen is alive." "Voss framed me for killing a ghost," Simone replied. "Now we prove it." Odessa pulled out a pencil stub. "I've been reconstructing the ledger from memory. Names, dates, betting amounts. But I need to see the complete records to fill the gaps." Darla nodded. "Harrow keeps her access codes in a locked drawer. I can get them during the next shift change." "Medical records are stored on a separate server," Morales added. "I can upload copies to a federal evidence database, but it has to happen from outside the prison network." Simone looked at each woman. "This plan only works if Harrow thinks she's winning. I'll keep fighting. Make her believe I've given up hope." "The fights are getting harder," Morales warned. "Your ribs haven't fully healed." "I'll manage," Simone said. "Focus on getting that evidence uploaded." They separated, returning to their daily routines. Laundry duty stretched through the afternoon heat. Simone operated the industrial washers while planning her next performance underground. The Key was appearing defeated while secretly building their case. That evening, guards escorted her to the basement fighting area. The second opponent was a wiry woman with prison tattoos covering both arms. She moved with desperate aggression, throwing wild punches that Simone avoided through careful footwork. The woman tired quickly. Simone waited, letting her exhaust herself against empty air, then stepped inside her guard and delivered 2 precise body shots. The woman dropped to her knees, gasping. "Stay down," Simone whispered. "When federal agents come, tell them what you saw here." The woman nodded weakly. Harrow watched from her elevated platform, making notes on her tablet. "Excellent control, Avery. Your reputation is well deserved." The next day passed in calculated normalcy. Breakfast, laundry duty, evening count. Another escorted trip underground for the third fight. This opponent was different. Larger, more experienced, moving with the confidence of someone who'd won multiple matches. Vale stood beside the fighting area, arms crossed. "Target those ribs," Vale called out. "Break them properly this time." The woman obeyed, driving repeated punches into Simone's injured side. Pain exploded through her torso with each impact. Simone absorbed the punishment, protecting her head while appearing increasingly vulnerable. Then she switched stance. The subtle change confused her opponent's timing. When the woman threw another rib shot, Simone slipped sideways and countered with one controlled punch to the solar plexus. The woman crumpled instantly. Harrow practically glowed with satisfaction. 3 wins! The betting pools are already reaching 7 figures. She turned to Vale. "Arrange the 4th match for tomorrow. Our investors are eager to increase their stakes." As guards prepared to escort Simone back upstairs, Morales approached with a medical kit. While pretending to check her injuries, she whispered, "Evidence package is scheduled. Federal investigators and 3 newspapers. It uploads automatically in 48 hours. The 4th fight came on a Tuesday morning after breakfast. Guards escorted Simone through the familiar underground corridor, while prisoners whispered behind their cell doors. Word had spread about her victories. Some inmates looked hopeful. Others seemed afraid of what might happen to them. Her opponent was a stocky woman with calloused hands and desperate eyes. She fought like someone who'd been promised something important. Maybe reduced time in isolation, maybe better meals for her cellmate. Harrow always found the right pressure points. The woman threw heavy punches that landed hard against Simone's forearms. Each impact sent pain through her still-healing ribs. Simone absorbed the punishment, waiting for an opening. When the woman overreached, Simone stepped inside and delivered one precise uppercut to the body. The woman folded forward, gasping. "Don't let them use you again," Simone whispered as guards approached. "When investigators come, tell them everything." The woman nodded weakly. Harrow smiled from her platform. 4 victories. The final match is generating unprecedented interest. Thursday brought the 5th fight. Another desperate opponent. Another controlled victory. Simone's opponent agreed to testify before guards dragged her away. The pattern held. Between matches, their plan moved forward like clockwork. Darla approached guards with casual conversation, learning their routines. During shift changes, she slipped into administrative areas and photographed key cards. Her mechanical skills helped her understand which doors required which access levels. "Got it?" Darla whispered during laundry duty, showing Simone a small plastic card. "Master Access opens everything including network terminals." Odessa spent hours in the library, appearing to read while actually reviewing every detail from the stolen ledger. Names, dates, payment amounts, betting totals. She repeated each entry under her breath until the information became permanent. 37 deceased inmates, she told Simone quietly. 42 altered medical reports, guard payments totaling over $600,000. Morales worked her regular shifts while secretly copying files. She photographed injury reports, transferred digital records, and prepared everything for upload. The package grew larger each day. "Federal evidence server is ready," she confirmed. "Upload happens automatically tomorrow night at 11 p.m. Nothing can stop it once the timer starts." Friday evening felt different. Victory seemed within reach. Simone had completed 5 fights without seriously injuring anyone. Evidence was prepared. Witnesses were ready. Harrow's network would finally face consequences. Then everything collapsed. Alarms sounded throughout Cell Block C at 9 p.m. Emergency lights bathed the corridor in harsh red as guards stormed through unlocked doors. Prisoners pressed against their bars, watching officers tear apart cells with violent efficiency. "Unauthorized network access detected," Lieutenant Vale announced. "Full security sweep initiated." They dragged Odessa from her cell first. The 68-year-old woman tried to walk with dignity, but officers forced her to the ground. Batons struck her shoulders, ribs, and legs. She collapsed without making a sound. "No!" Simone shouted from behind her bars. Guards carried Odessa's unconscious form toward the infirmary. Blood dripped from her head onto the concrete floor. Morales was next. Officers handcuffed her roughly while she protested her innocence. "I don't know what you're talking about. I follow all protocols." "Evidence tampering," Vale said. "Federal investigation required." They dragged Morales away before she could confirm whether the upload had succeeded. Harrow appeared in the corridor carrying a metal trash can. Inside were the torn pages of the stolen ledger. She struck a match and dropped it inside. Flames consumed months of carefully documented evidence. "Did you really think we wouldn't notice?" Harrow asked, watching paper turn to ash. "Every network connection is monitored. Every file access is logged." The final betrayal came from Darla. She stepped forward holding the master access card, her face carefully neutral. "Simone forced me to steal this," she announced loudly. "She threatened my daughter if I didn't cooperate." Guards accepted the card while prisoners watched in stunned silence. Harrow's smile turned cruel. "Your final opponent has been selected, Avery. Young Celia Boone. She fights you tomorrow night, or she spends the rest of her sentence in permanent isolation. No books, no visitors, no human contact except guards." The words hit harder than any punch Simone had absorbed underground. "She's not a fighter," Simone said desperately. "She's just a scared kid." "Then you'd better make it quick," Harrow replied. Guards surrounded Simone's cell, unlocking the door with mechanical precision. They dragged her toward solitary confinement, while she watched smoke rise from the destroyed evidence. Odessa might be dying. Morales was arrested. Darla had betrayed them. Celia faced an impossible choice. The solitary door slammed shut, leaving Simone alone in absolute darkness. The solitary cell felt like a tomb. Concrete walls pressed close around Simone as machinery rumbled beneath the floor. Construction sounds echoed through the ventilation system, hammering, drilling, metal scraping against metal. They were building something massive down there. Simone touched her swollen ribs carefully. The beating after the raid had been methodical, professional. Vale knew exactly how to cause maximum pain without leaving marks that cameras would catch. Each breath sent sharp spikes through her chest. Her mind kept returning to Odessa's blood on the corridor floor, the way the old woman had collapsed without fighting back. Morales dragged away in handcuffs while protesting her innocence. Everything they had worked for seemed destroyed. The door buzzed. 2 guards entered, followed by Elena Morales carrying a medical bag. Handcuffs connected her wrists to a chain around her waist. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. "Prisoner requires medical evaluation before tomorrow's event," the lead guard announced. 15 minutes maximum. Morales knelt beside Simone with practiced efficiency. Her hands moved quickly, checking for serious injuries while the guards watched from the doorway. She pressed gently against Simone's ribs, causing her to wince. "Possible fracture," Morales said professionally. "Wrapping required for stabilization." She unrolled white bandages from her bag. As she wound them around Simone's torso, her fingers pressed something small and hard against her skin. Simone remained perfectly still, while Morales secured the hidden object beneath layers of cloth. "Deep breathing exercises are essential," Morales continued, her voice carrying double meaning. "Upload your recovery fully. Trust the process completely." Darla's technique was planned perfectly. The guards shifted impatiently near the door. One checked his watch. Morales adjusted the bandage placement, speaking in careful medical terms. "Your elderly friend survived the procedure. Amazing memory retention despite trauma. Every detail recorded successfully before complications arose." She met Simone's eyes briefly. Access restored exactly as intended. Gate controls functional when timing requires. Simone understood. Odessa had memorized everything before the raid. The upload had worked. Darla's apparent betrayal was part of their plan. She needed Harrow's complete trust to control security during the broadcast. Blood pressure elevated but manageable, Morales finished, packing her supplies. Patient cleared for scheduled activity. The guards escorted her away, without allowing further conversation. Alone again, Simone carefully extracted the hidden message from beneath her bandages. A small piece of paper contained technical details about the arena construction. Camera positions, guard stations, emergency exits, and structural weaknesses. She studied the information until she could visualize every detail. Tomorrow wouldn't be about defeating Celia. It would be about survival when everything exploded. Harrow expected a simple execution, Simone destroying an innocent woman while Voss watched in satisfaction. Instead, they would face something else entirely. Simone closed her eyes and reconstructed the arena in her mind. Metal walkways above the fighting floor, narrow passages between machinery, security gates that Darla could control, camera angles that would capture everything. She spent hours planning not for victory, but for chaos. When hundreds of prisoners filled that underground space, she needed to keep them alive during Harrow's inevitable retaliation. The sun was setting when Lieutenant Vale's boots echoed down the corridor. The cell door buzzed open. "Time to go, Princess," Vale sneered. "Your boyfriend Voss just arrived. Flew in special to watch you get broken." Vale's grip on Simone's arm tightened as they descended into the laundry tunnel. The concrete walls dripped with condensation, and harsh fluorescent lights cast sickly shadows on their faces. Behind them, the thunderous sound of hundreds of boots echoed through the corridors as guards forced prisoners from their cells. "Move faster," Vale snarled, shoving Simone forward. "Your fans are waiting." The tunnel opened into a massive underground space that had been transformed into an arena. Industrial washing machines lined the walls like silent witnesses. Metal walkways stretched overhead, packed with guards carrying riot batons. In the center, a makeshift boxing ring dominated the concrete floor, its canvas stained with old blood that no amount of bleach could erase. Prisoners streamed through multiple entrances, pushed forward by guards with electric prods. Women stumbled and fell as they were herded into cramped viewing areas surrounded by chain-link fencing. The air reeked of sweat, fear, and industrial detergent. High above the chaos, Graham Voss stood behind bulletproof glass in an elevated booth. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his expensive suit immaculate. At 62, he looked like a successful businessman, rather than the monster who had destroyed so many lives. Beside him, Warden Harrow adjusted camera angles with cold precision. 15 years I've waited for this moment. Voss spoke into his headset, his voice carrying to gambling establishments across the country. The great Simone Avery, reduced to what she really is, my property. Behind another sheet of armored glass, Martin Keene hunched over computer screens displaying betting odds. His fingers flew across keyboards as money poured in from wealthy criminals eager to watch a champion fall. Officially dead for months, Keene had been hiding in plain sight, managing Voss's financial empire while the world mourned his supposed murder. On the blood-stained canvas, Celia Boone waited in gray prison clothing that hung loose on her thin frame. Her hands shook uncontrollably. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she stared at the screaming crowd of prisoners forced to watch her execution. Darla Kessler stood with Harrow's enforcers near the security station, her face a mask of loyalty. Her massive hands rested casually near the control panel that could unlock every gate in the facility. To everyone watching, she appeared completely committed to Harrow's authority. Simone scanned the arena methodically. Every detail from Morales's hidden message proved accurate. Emergency exits remained locked and heavily guarded. Camera positions provided perfect angles for the broadcast. But more importantly, she spotted the people who mattered most. Odessa Lane sat near the front barrier, her elderly face calm despite the chaos surrounding her. Every name, every date, every crime had been burned into her remarkable memory. Elena Morales stood with other medical staff behind the ring, her equipment bag positioned exactly where it needed to be. Vale shoved Simone toward the ring steps. "Get in there and do what you're told. No heroics, no speeches, just break that little girl until she stops moving." Simone climbed through the ropes and walked to the center of the canvas. Celia backed away, sobbing openly. "Please don't hurt me," Celia whispered. "I never did anything to you." Simone moved close enough that only Celia could hear her words. "When the bell rings, fall down immediately. Stay behind me, no matter what happens. Trust me." Celia's eyes widened, but she nodded frantically. Voss's voice boomed through the arena speakers, addressing both the captive audience and his wealthy viewers. "Ladies and gentlemen, witness the final humiliation of Simone Avery. She will destroy this innocent young woman, or she will rot in prison forever. There are no other options." The crowd of prisoners fell silent. Guards positioned themselves at every exit. Cameras focused on the ring from multiple angles, broadcasting live to gambling halls where millionaires sipped champagne while betting on human suffering. Harrow raised her hand toward the timekeeper. "Begin the execution." The bell clanged through the underground space like a funeral dirge. Celia immediately dropped to the canvas and crawled behind Simone's legs. But instead of pursuing her supposed victim, Simone turned toward the main camera. She kept her hands lowered, her voice clear and unwavering. "My name is Simone Avery," she began, staring directly into the lens. "I was the undefeated welterweight champion of the world. Graham Voss framed me for murder because I refused to throw a fight for his criminal organization." Voss screamed orders at the camera operators, but Simone continued speaking. "These women died inside Warden Harrow's fighting network. Remember their names." She began the list that Odessa had memorized. Sarah Martinez, age 24, beaten to death in an underground match. Keisha Williams, age 31, died from internal bleeding after refusing to fight. Voss's face twisted with rage as Simone's voice carried through the speakers. He grabbed a technician by the shirt and shook him violently. "Cut the feed! Cut it now!" Voss screamed. "Turn off those cameras!" But the technician stared at his monitors in confusion. "Sir, I can't. Something's overriding the system." The screens throughout the arena suddenly flickered. Medical reports appeared on every display. Betting records scrolled across the monitors. Guard payment schedules flashed in bold letters. Then Odessa's voice filled the speakers, calm and precise as she recited every detail from memory. The following officers received payments for falsifying injury reports. Odessa's recorded testimony began. Captain Lorna Vale, $2,000 per month. Sergeant Davis, $800 per fight. Morales stood behind the medical station, her fingers working quickly on a hidden tablet. She had successfully redirected the broadcast stream. The underground event was now transmitting directly to federal investigators, news stations, and the families of every woman who had died in Harrow's fighting network. Harrow's composure finally cracked. She spun toward Vale and screamed orders that echoed through the arena. "Release the enforcers! All of them! End this now!" Vale blew a sharp whistle. Doors slammed open around the arena perimeter. Marin Rusk charged through the entrance, leading 20 armed guards and inmates carrying metal trays, mop handles, and improvised clubs. Their boots thundered across the concrete floor as they rushed toward the ring. But Darla Kessler moved faster than anyone expected. She tackled Vale from behind, driving her into the barrier wall. Vale's keys flew from her belt as she hit the concrete. Darla snatched them and sprinted toward the prisoner holding areas. "Now!" Darla shouted. "Fight back now!" She unlocked gate after gate, releasing hundreds of women who had suffered under Harrow's system. The confrontation exploded across the entire laundry floor. Simone pulled Celia behind her as Marin's formation reached the ring. A guard swung a metal tray at her head. She ducked and felt the edge scrape her shoulder, drawing blood. Another attacker lunged from the left. Simone pivoted and drove 2 disciplined body punches into his ribs, dropping him without wasting energy on his head. Marin climbed through the ropes with a broken mop handle, her eyes wild with desperation. "You ruined everything. Everything!" Simone backed toward the narrow ring entrance, forcing the attackers to come at her one by one instead of surrounding her. She absorbed a glancing blow to her back, twisted away from a swinging club, and caught Marin's wrist as she tried to stab downward with the splintered wood. Throughout the arena, prisoners Simone had trained formed defensive circles around Odessa and the elderly women. They moved together, protecting each other's flanks just as she had taught them. Their voices rose in defiant shouts as they held their ground against the guards. Vale pulled herself up from the concrete, blood streaming from her nose. She spotted the control box mounted on the metal walkway above the arena. If she could reach it, she could shut down the entire broadcast manually. Vale climbed the narrow stairs toward the controls. The arena lights began flickering as she reached for the main power switches. Simone saw her moving toward the walkway. She broke away from the ring, fighting through the chaos as the lights started going dark one by one. The main power died with a grinding mechanical sound. Emergency lights bathed the laundry in deep red shadows as alarms wailed through the concrete walls. Simone climbed the metal stairs after Vale, her injured ribs screaming with each step. Vale reached the elevated walkway first. She pulled a black baton from her belt and turned to face Simone with hatred burning in her eyes. "You should have stayed quiet," Vale snarled. "Should have taken your beating like every other convict." She swung the baton in a wide arc. Simone ducked, but the metal caught her shoulder and sent pain shooting down her arm. Vale pressed forward, driving the weapon toward Simone's head. Simone stepped back along the narrow walkway. The railing pressed against her spine as Vale attacked again. This time, the baton struck her injured ribs directly. Fire exploded through her chest. She gasped and stumbled against the metal barrier. Vale raised the weapon for a finishing blow. "Time to learn your place." But Simone had been studying Vale's rhythm. The guard telegraphed every swing with a slight lean. She favored her right side. Her feet stayed planted too long after each strike. When Vale brought the baton down again, Simone caught her wrist with both hands. She twisted hard and used Vale's momentum to spin her around. Vale's grip loosened. The baton clattered across the walkway. Vale stumbled toward the railing. For a moment she teetered on the edge, 30 feet above the concrete floor. Simone grabbed her uniform shirt and pulled her back onto a lower service platform instead of letting her fall. Vale hit the platform hard but safely. She groaned and rolled onto her side, alive but stunned. Below them, the battle was turning. Darla had Marin pinned against a washing machine, both hands locked around her wrists. "It's over, Marin. They can't protect us anymore." Prisoners surrounded the corrupt guards in tight circles. The women moved together, disciplined and coordinated. They had learned to protect each other instead of fighting alone. Near the boiler room entrance, Voss and Keene tried to escape through the underground tunnel. But federal agents poured through the opposite entrance, their tactical lights cutting through the red emergency glow. The men found themselves trapped between concrete walls with nowhere to run. "Graham Voss and Martin Keene, you're under arrest," an agent shouted. Keene raised his hands, his face pale with terror. "I can explain everything. The records, the money transfers, all of it." Simone started back down the stairs, but Harrow stepped into her path. The warden held a steel pipe in both hands like a baseball bat. Her perfect composure was completely gone. Sweat dripped from her forehead. Her uniform was torn and stained. "You destroyed everything I built," Harrow whispered. 15 years of work. Gone. She swung the pipe at Simone's head. Simone leaned back, feeling the metal whoosh past her face. Harrow attacked again, this time aiming for her ribs. Simone twisted aside and the pipe rang against the stair railing. Harrow's swings grew wilder and more desperate. She had no technique, no control. Just rage and panic driving her forward. Simone waited. She absorbed a glancing blow to her forearm, stepped away from another wild swing. Her body ached and her lungs burned, but her mind stayed calm. When Harrow overextended on the next attack, Simone moved. She stepped inside the swing, trapped Harrow's arms, and delivered 3 precise punches to the body. Left hook to the ribs, right cross to the solar plexus, left uppercut under the sternum. The combination landed with championship precision. Harrow's eyes rolled back. The pipe fell from her hands as she collapsed onto the concrete stairs. Federal agents climbed toward them, handcuffs ready. Below, cameras captured everything as Voss, Keene, Vale, and Harrow were restrained in front of hundreds of witnesses. Dawn light began filtering through the high windows as the fighting ring became an active crime scene. Later that morning, Simone sat across from 2 federal investigators in the administration building's conference room. Sunlight streamed through windows that hadn't been cleaned in months. Her wrists were no longer chained. Her orange jumpsuit had been replaced with civilian clothes brought by the agents. "Tell us about the vehicle that was supposedly used in the hit and run," Agent Martinez said. She had kind eyes, but her pen moved quickly across her notepad. "I never saw that car before the arrest," Simone replied. Her voice was steady, despite the exhaustion weighing on her shoulders. The surveillance footage they showed in court was altered. The timestamp jumped. The license plate was too clear for a night recording. Down the hall, Odessa spoke to another investigator. The elderly woman's memory was perfect, even after the beating she'd survived. She recited names, dates, and financial figures that had been destroyed in the ledger fire. 19 women listed as transfers, Odessa said. But I watched the transport schedules. No buses came for them. Sarah Martinez died after her 3rd fight. Keisha Williams collapsed in the ring and never woke up. They called it a heart attack, but she was 24 years old. In the adjacent room, Darla faced the hardest questions. She sat with her shoulders hunched, accepting every accusation without excuse. "You helped plant the damaged vehicle?" the investigator asked. "Yes." Darla's voice was barely audible. "They told me it was insurance fraud. I needed money for my daughter's treatment. But that don't make it right. I put an innocent woman in prison." Celia spoke next, her hands trembling as she described the threats that forced her into the tournament. "They said if I refused, they'd put me in isolation forever. Said nobody would remember my name. Morales provided the medical evidence that tied everything together. I signed false reports for 3 years," she admitted. "Deaths became heart attacks. Broken bones became falls. I documented everything on my personal drive because I knew someday someone would ask for the truth." Over the following 6 weeks, federal investigators tore apart every lie that had built North River's criminal network. Digital forensics experts confirmed the forged traffic footage. Independent medical examiners revealed how autopsy reports had been falsified. Financial auditors traced money from offshore betting accounts directly to Voss's corporate shell companies. The evidence was overwhelming. Voss had manufactured Simone's conviction using altered surveillance footage, planted evidence, and bribed officials throughout the justice system. Keene, supposedly murdered, had been managing the prison gambling operation from a secret location outside the state. Simone's conviction was formally overturned on a Tuesday morning in federal court. She stood as the judge read the decision, but felt no celebration. Too many women had died while she was powerless to help them. Harrow received 47 federal charges, including racketeering, murder conspiracy, and civil rights violations. Vale faced similar charges for her role in prisoner abuse and evidence tampering. Voss was indicted on organized crime charges spanning 15 years of corruption. Even Keene, desperate to avoid the death penalty, provided testimony that implicated judges, prosecutors, and corporate executives. Darla received a reduced sentence in exchange for her cooperation, but she never asked for forgiveness. "I earned every year they give me," she told Simone during their final conversation. "Just promise me you'll keep fighting for the others." If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.